All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Casey.
And I'm Nick.
And we are bad at predicting the future.
Absolutely terrible.
And so is everyone else in this room. But not only are we bad at predicting the future, we have a hard time even conceptualizing what it could be, imagining possible futures. And this has been explored and discovered in psychology as well. And we're just going to look at a quick personality test just to prove the point. So if everyone could take a deep breath, then exhale. This is your current self. This is you today on March 11th, 2019 in South by Southwest. Now I want you to take a second and imagine yourself at 7 years old. Got it? Okay. We're going to say that that's your future self. All right? Now we're going to have you plot this on a continuum based on how you thought about each of yourselves. So if you thought about your future self as a complete stranger, someone you didn't know at all about, you'd be over here on the left-hand side. If you thought about yourself as who you are now, just a bit more wrinkles further down the line, that would be your current self. That would be on the right hand here. And in the middle, your acquaintance, someone in between. This idea of plotting yourself on a continuum based on your perception of time is known as future self continuity. And it's a topic that, depending on where you are in that continuum, it can say a lot about how you make decisions today.
For example, if in 7 years' time you think that you're going to be the same person, your behaviors over the course of your life are going to be a lot healthier. You're going to save a lot more money, you're going to exercise a lot more, and you're going to smoke a lot less. But on the other hand, if in 7 years' time you're going to be a total stranger to yourself, your behaviors will be a little bit more unhealthy.
That's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't know that guy.
It falls over. So this is, they found those correlations, but they also decided to do some experiments to see if they could affect how people think about themselves through time. So this is Hal Hirschfield out of Stanford. And he and his team, in collaboration with Microsoft, did an experiment where they would take the participants' faces, turn them into avatars, and then age them. Then they would put their participants into this virtual reality environment. And half of the participants would see the older version of themselves when they looked in the mirror. And they found with subsequent testing that for those that saw the older version of themselves, they would elect to save twice as much as those that hadn't. So the theory goes that if you can interact with your future self in some way, you're more likely to make better decisions today.
Right. If one small interaction can have such a huge impact, how do we help our future selves out? And that's what we plan on discussing today. We're going to throw a whole lot at you today. First, we're going to start off by reflecting on Black Mirror and its cultural significance. And then we're going to move into what is speculative design and how does Black Mirror fit into that, and then also how do we use it. Then we're going to throw a whole buttload of examples at you, and then we're going to follow up with some actionable insights. But just a spoiler alert, just want to let you know if you haven't seen anything, we might give some things away, but just want to say my piece. So, yeah.
So, the show is very popular. For those who don't know, the show gets its title from these, our screens in the off-road, the black mirrors that reflect us literally in our technology. And it's often been described as, or compared to, a modern-day We believe that this is an apt parallel for a few reasons. One, they're both an anthology series. Their episodes start and end at the same time. Two, they're science fiction, they go dip into horror. But third, and most importantly, they both tap into the fears of the time. They understand the zeitgeist, and they exploit it for entertainment value. So with The Twilight Zone, there's a famous episode called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And in this episode, it's a small community where they've been infiltrated by aliens. And no one knows who's an alien and who's not. And they say that this was tapping into the fears of McCarthyism, the Red Scare, and communism sweeping across the United States. But that's not uncommon, right? This idea of exploiting this type of fear at a macro level for some sort of entertainment value. Godzilla, what is it about? It's about a creature, a faceless creature from above that's just destroying Japanese cities with no concern for who's down there. This came out 9 years after the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan, and many say it was tapping into that same fear, and that's what made it so powerful. Zombies, they say, there's a theory that zombies have been so popular in the last 10 years, but what are zombies? They are outsiders that are coming for our autonomy, for our lives, and unstoppable. And some say this is tapping into our fear of globalization, of the leveling of the playing field with the internet. So this is something that is something that's come through our fiction.
And what Black Mirror does is really tap into our general uneasiness and discomfort with all this new technology. The difference between the examples that Casey just walked through and Black Mirror is that Black Mirror doesn't really feel that far-fetched. It almost feels like a world 5 minutes from now. So this is Charlie Brooker. He is the writer, the creator, and basically the mastermind behind the whole series. And what he said when he was writing the series is a lot of these ideas felt really crazy to him. In fact, I think his process went a little bit like this.
The monkeys might fly out of my butt.
But what is crazy is that his ideas really aren't that crazy, and a lot of them are starting to come to life. So this is the episode Metalhead, and it's all about these like really creepy little dog robots that go around killing people. It might remind you of some of the things that Boston Dynamics is doing. In the episode Nosedive, which is my personal favorite episode, you have a world and a society where everything you do or say is judged and rated, and depending on your rating, certain doors will open or close the society, which sounds totally dystopian, right? Well, maybe not, because the Chinese government is looking to implement a social credit system by the year 2020.
Here's the thing. It's really easy to get docked points in the system.
China's version factors in everything from jaywalking to smoking on trains to buying too many video games.
Jaywalking? Smoking? Too many video games? That is not good news for the coolest kid in 7th grade.
And if you've been reading the headlines, this is actually already starting to come to life. And just last year alone, they've banned 23 million people from traveling on airplanes, on planes, on trains. And it's already starting to come to life. And then the last example is the episode Crocodile. And this is all about this self-driving pizza truck, which actually sounds like kind of great in theory. But this guy goes on to kind of wreak a bunch of havoc. He leads to like 3 people dying. And in a weird life imitates art kind of moment. Look what rolled out at CES last year, a collaboration between Toyota and Pizza Hut. And because Black Mirror is never one to miss a beat, they chime in. We know how this goes.
Now, as we were doing research for this talk, we found there's a lot of technology that's real that I think is pretty great. Now we want to take advantage of. So in the episode Archangel, it's the ability to place a chip in the heads of your children. And anytime anything that scares your child appears in front of them and they see, and their cortisol spikes, it blurs it out. So it takes them out and protects them from the scary things in the real world. Now, when I found out this was real, I thought I have to take advantage of it. So as a new father, I convinced my wife to put our son Henry into the Archangel Beta program. But we found that once we put him in his head, it started blurring things out that we think is important. So Henry no longer gets invested.
What happened to the frog that parked illegally?
Can't even imagine. It's 3 important pillars for a child. Check it out.
So why does Black Mirror resonate so much with us? Why does it really tap this nerve? Most likely it's because it gets us thinking. It really throws all of these what-if scenarios and technologies and really starts to question and make us wonder. It has morphed into this kind of new expression for a modern age. So in the same way that if you were to call something Orwellian, we know somebody's probably talking about an experience that's very Big Brother or surveillance state. Or if somebody says Kafkaesque, then we know that they're probably talking about a very surreal or illogical experience. And I'm trying to think of a third one.
Mick, it's not that hard.
That's what she said.
That's kind of like a status. Yeah.
But if something is called very Black Mirror or Black Mirror-esque, it has its own pop culture shorthand for what it means. So it's a way of tech run amok or unintended consequences of this new technology we don't understand. And journalists have taken note of this as well. Perhaps you see these polygraph job screenings are called very Black Mirror, or when Google's putting out a new city, it's called very Black Mirror, or these clothing at the gym is called very Black Mirror. This very festival has been called very Black Mirror quite a few times.
And that's what it does, right? Is it really puts all of these what-if scenarios and things like that in front of us, and I totally duplicated this slide. Anyway, but yeah, so it really gets us thinking. So like, what if we had the capability and the technology to record all of our memories and catalog them? On a positive note, it might help with our anxiety. We might stop worrying about what we said, like in 3rd grade, and waking up in the middle of the night about it. On the other hand, it could maybe start making people start living in the past instead of the present. Or what if we had this technology where we could take someone's DNA and make a copy of them, a digital copy? If your DNA was taken, would you care personally what would happen to that copy of yourself? And do you worry at all what would be some constitutional rights around that copy, or would it have ethical treatment? Or lastly, what if your time's about up and you want to preserve yourself for a loved one? Do you worry about what that could impact their grieving process or their sense of death or finality?
The most
Provocative and compelling is really how it tells us something about ourselves. It's about how we use technology and how it influences our society and our everyday lives. Because it's never the technology that goes awry, it's always us. Charlie Brooker has said that it's a show about weak people using powerful tools. And by weak people, I'm pretty sure he means most of humanity. So if you may remember such history lessons as those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So I don't know if anybody remembers these two guys, but it was, if you want to talk about weak people using powerful tools, it was just this time last year that they started arguing over the internet whose nuclear button was bigger. And it really sent everybody into a kind of panic that World War III was imminent. In fact, the doomsday clock was moved to within 2 minutes of midnight, which is the closest it's been since the beginning of the Cold War. And it had us all feeling a little bit like Rust Cold, like everything we have done or will do, we will do over and over again for forever, like time is a flat circle. So we really need a way to break that cycle and really just learn from our mistakes. And so if the question is, how do we learn, then the answer is in the title of this talk, Speculative Design. And here's where we'll switch to Casey.
So let's introduce you to two people. These are Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby. These two wrote a book called Speculative Everything, which lays out this idea around design that is a way to raise questions using design and impose what-if statements so that you can talk about and debate the kind of futures you want and the kind of futures you don't want. In the book itself, they actually reference Black Mirror, that it does it very well as a way to generate debate. One definition of speculative design is this. It's the use of design to trigger debate and critical reflection on alternative, socially oriented narratives. Now, I feel it's always helpful to look at a few different definitions to help round it out, so let's hear from a few more people. This is J. Paul Neely. He's a designer in London, and he says that it's the design of future products and services as a way to explore the implications of emerging tech or sociocultural trends. Okay, let's hear from one more. This is Anab Jain. She's a TED Fellow and the co-founder of the agency Superflex, and she says that their work imagines, investigates, builds, and tests ways in which emerging tech influences and shapes our world. Now, if you're doing research online, you'll see that there's a lot of different words and a lot of different definitions that overlap with what we're saying. But for the sake of ease and clarity, we're just going to be calling it speculative design today. And there's also a character limit on your title at South by Southwest, so you'll This is from Elliot Montgomery, and it's a way to demonstrate how speculative design borrows tools and methods from different disciplines. So from the left, we have unconstrained thinking. This is where art would reside. This is music and movies and Black Mirror would be over here. These are the methods of the unconstrained thinking. On the right, we have strategy, we have business, and then all throughout, there's all these other different disciplines that speculative design sits right in the middle of, so that it can borrow the tools and methods to have the most effective designs that they put out in the world to start these conversations. In the book Speculative Everything, there is column A. Right when you open it, there are two columns. Column A is a list of words that is the kind of design that Nick and I do every day, and perhaps you do as well. It's things like problem solving, innovation, applications. These are the things that classic design is thinking about and concerned with. Whereas column B are words such as problem finding, provocation, implications. These are the types of things that speculative design, these are the goals of it. So you could make the argument that column A is a lot like Steve Krug's famous book, Don't Make Me Think. It is all about removing any sort of friction from the user's life so they can complete their tasks. And column B would be more along the lines of, it's time to think, motherfucker. Built the whole talk around that airport.
Speculative design can come in many forms, all with the express purpose of sparking conversation. Before we move on, we just kind of want to hit home some of the goals of speculative design. So the first one is really to provoke and pose questions. Simple enough, okay. The second one is to shift from design application to design implication. So shifting from what we build, not shifting from what we build, not from what we, rewind. So shifting from what we build and then also thinking about its larger impact. And then third is to unsettle our present and not predict the future. And if you want to be unsettled, you really can't do much better than Black Mirror.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So how does one actually use this method? For this, we'll be talking through J. Paul Haley's framework.
JP is no.
Yeah, he doesn't know us. And so we start with a signal. What's an area or a focus or a signal that is could be emerging, it could be already here that you really want to explore and dive into. So here it is by no means exhaustive list, but you can see there's a lot of things that are happening about these topics. But so emerging could be something like AI or machine learning, or already here could be climate change and fake news, for example. And if you really want to learn more about signals, there is a great book by Amy Webb, who is a futurist, who really goes in and tells you how to identify signals and how to predict the next big disruption.
Next, after you focus on your signal or the area you want to move towards, you focus on a scenario. If that signal were to continue, what would it look like, this scenario, in some possible future? In speculative design, there's this framework of thinking about the future. It's called the future cones. And there are different ways to think about where those scenarios could fall. So in the probable futures, these are things business as usual. This is what we do every year, every day. This is what autonomous cars and AI do coming. This is a very probable future. A plausible future is something that could happen, but you're not exactly sure. It's not as probable. So it's not as probable. So this is where scenario planning is, just to make sure you cover all your bases as you're making decisions. And then finally, there are possible futures. This is zoomed out in an even bigger way. These are things that might happen, but there would need to be huge technological changes or global disruption in order for that to take place. Now, as you're creating your speculative designs or looking into the future, it helps to think about where your scenario falls and which one of these cones.
Right, and so now that you have a scenario, you're going to want to illustrate that and get something in front of people that they can react to. Annette Jane says that this is making the future more tangible. And those can come in a variety of ways. You can have physical objects, you can do fashion, stories, case studies, etc. All with the purpose of sparking conversation. And the key here, though, you really need to be provocative. You need a provocative prototype.
Or, as no one calls it, a prototype.
Yeah.
It's like that word. So next, you've got your signal, you've built the scenario, you've built the speculative design. You want to have discussions on what would the implications be of this design if it was real, and what future it would be if that future is possible. So the way to do that is you would put these designs or these things you've created in the hands of users, in the hands of people that this would affect. So it's a way of participatory discussions about this design. In a way, it's usability testing for possible abuse, or
abusability testing, if you like. Yeah. And that's what Black Mirror does, right? It kind of just throws these prototypes right into the middle of a human story with all the complicated messiness of real life and complicated human psyche, and starts to ask, what would this design do to X? What would it do to this signal? And yada, yada, yada. And now that you've got people talking, it's really all about how do we take those conversations and change perceptions for our current behavior. And if we are living in the plausible and the possible future, or probable and plausible futures, how do we shift our cone into more of a preferable future? A preferable future is a place where we all want to live, and it's a pretty good spot to be in.
So next, often the best way to demonstrate what speculative design is actually show a lot of examples that have been done out in the world. So we're going to be focusing by signals we move through. We try to group them by signals. And when Black Mirror has explored these ideas, we bring them up, but not always. So the first signal we're going to look at is relationships and how the future of relationships might play out. As you may know, in the episode Hang the DJ by Black Mirror, it's a very charming episode. It's about two couples that upload their consciousness into a system, and they run a bunch of simulations to help them decide on their future romantic partner. It's very nice. It's one of the few positive stories in the whole series. But what it's doing also is it's raising questions about how comfortable we feel turning over more and more of our decision-making abilities to possibly things we don't fully understand. Are we okay with this moving down this path? So a speculative designer named Nicole Hay wanted to ask that same question in a much lower fidelity version. This is called the True Love Tinder robot. And the way it works is that you hook your Tinder account into this contraption, and you put your hands into this sensor here. And based how your body reacts when you see a picture, it responds accordingly.
Hello, human. I am the True Love Tinder robot. I'm going to help you find love. You can trust me because I am a robot. Let's begin. Look at this person. Swipe right.
So it's pretty creepy and it's tongue-in-cheek, but it does raise the question, and what you're trying to get at is how comfortable do we feel continuing to give our information and having decisions made for us. So this got a lot of press. It's all over the web. Maybe some of you saw this story. And as a speculative design, the fact that it's being discussed, that's a sign of a new project.
Another type of relationship being explored is the concept of family. So in the past decade or so, there have been huge advancements in the fields of genetic engineering and IVF. And with IVF, designed babies are totally a thing. And for a price, you can choose things like its sex, you can screen it for disorders and diseases. So yeah, it's kind of weird. But what could the future of family look like for a same-sex couple? Could it be possible that they could have a biological child? And that's a question that two designers from Japan, Ai Hasegawa and Speculative, wanted to explore. They used this new research that found you can take a stem cell and create a sperm and an egg cell from it, which is kind of groundbreaking. But they used that as a jumping off point for their project, the Impossible or I'm Possible Baby. And what they did here is they took a lesbian couple and both of their 23andMe data, and they uploaded it into a simulator that they built. And that kind of mapped the visual traits of each parent to potential biological children. But it didn't stop there, because through storytelling, they really wanted to create these vignettes and kind of round out the whole story and turn it into much more of a way to bring these traits to life. So what they did is they wrapped it all up into a really nice photo album, and they drove over and gave it to them as a gift. And they really let them experience and start to think and process of what their future could look like if they had these children. And it was really impactful and really a thoughtful and touching story. And they made a documentary about this where they went and broadcast it nationally in Japan, which it sparked a lot of conversation and debate. And it really is this really sweet story that the designer says is a conversation that we really need to start having, because it's a very divisive topic that it has a lot of people thinking of, like, asking what is right or acceptable. So yeah, it's a great one.
So the next signal we're going to focus on is biotechnology. And this, although not explored in speculative design as much, is something that, in Black Mirror, it is something that's described and explored in speculative design. So for those that don't know, CRISPR is a very important area that speculative designers are concerned with and the future of it. And to do an incredibly dumbed-down version of what CRISPR is, it would be a matter of taking someone's genetic code and cutting a piece of it out, and then pasting in a whole other piece, and actually editing, almost like Microsoft Word, editing the very foundations of life. Literally, I'm trying to do it talk right now. So this CRISPR is actually happening quite a bit. You're seeing more stories about this. Perhaps you saw this one through NPR recently, where a scientist in China claims he created HIV-resistant babies using CRISPR And obviously the whole scientific community was concerned ethically, and we as people were pretty worried about it. But speculative designers are a little bit ahead, trying to think of what else could happen if we move forward. So this Dutch designer, Nicole Spit, she figured out how CRISPR works and what is possible, and she did this project called the text butterfly. And although those are painted on, those are actually at a genetic level, the melanin pigmentation is altered using CRISPR to write those letters on the wings. And she wanted to raise the question, what would happen if this was combined, this CRISPR capability, with the free market, with capitalism, with marketing generally? What could it turn into? So imagine you're standing outside waiting to get into one of these South by Southwest events, and a butterfly flies up. It has a logo on it. If that's possible, should we be doing it? She's trying to push that by actually creating these speculative designs.
Yeah, another type of gene editing being researched is how to stop the biological clock. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but our culture seems to have a never-ending fascination with never growing old. You've got movies, you've got magazines, advertising. If you've got the money, maybe you'll do plastic surgery. If you don't, maybe you'll just face-tune your selfie. So a Finnish designer named Emilia Tikka really wanted to explore the question of longevity with CRISPR and the philosophical questions of life and death. So she designed what is called a CRISPR inhaler, and this is basically a rejuvenation mask that would administer these different chemicals that are meant to keep you looking younger through the course of your life. And what she did was she installed it into a gallery space in Berlin, and next to it she hung a whole series of photographs. And in those photographs, it really depicts this couple's relationships through the years and how it's affected by the mask, because the man decides to stay younger and use the mask, and the woman decides to age naturally. So she debuted this during Berlin Science Week, and hosted a panel full of scientists to really start getting to talk about the innovation and the technology of CRISPR. And here she really wanted to pose questions like, how does this impact us culturally, and how do we think this will affect our society, and just really exploring those kind of ramifications.
So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome to People's Court 2022. I will be defending my client, Dynamic Genetics, who has had our proprietary DNA material stolen by this man, Arnold Mann. Let me walk you through the evidence. So this is the spit kit that was provided to Arnold Mann to give us a genetic sample so that he could be run through the National Health Insurance algorithm to determine his genetic risk. Now with that risk, as his protocol, we raised his premiums. He then had to pay more. He would end up costing more than he was paying to do it. So we raised his premiums, that's what you do. But he was not going to do that, so he had some backstreet pirated genetic material go through in this type of gene therapy so that he could fool the systems. If you print out his genome, you'll see that that is the code that my client, Dynamic Genetics, has created, that he has stolen from us. And we have so much more evidence to prove that he has defrauded my client. Now, if you don't believe us, you could also listen to his interrogation.
I'm going to respect you. You're in detail.
So this is a project by Superflux, where they created a whole fictional law case to explore what could happen when we get into genetic risk profiling, and what would it be like if you could pirate someone's genetic code, and what would be possible in the future. And they were trying to look at it in a more tangible way than perhaps just like a white paper outlining of what's there.
Whoa, okay, I just want to say, Casey, I can't believe we've gotten this far without a fart or a poop joke. I decided to do that. Well, hold on to your butts, because the next project on the P deck is the E. coli project. And this is a project all about a collaboration between designers and scientists in the field of synthetic biology. And synthetic biology is all about re-engineering living organisms to do things that we would find useful. So back in 2009, some wicked smart scientist kids from Cambridge University standardized sequences of DNA and called them biobricks. And they took these biobricks and they put them into E. coli. And this essentially turned the bacteria into living color-coded sensors, and kind of like litmus. So in the presence of certain chemicals, they would be designed to secrete a rainbow of colors. So that's taking ordinarily harmful bacteria and turning it into something that's useful, like testing drinking water. But the designers really wanted to challenge how the scientists could use this in the future and really start to think about future uses of E. coli. For instance, they wanted to definitely think about how it could be used and to in the early detection of diseases.
By 2039, you can go to the supermarket and buy the simple probiotic yogurt for cheap personalised disease monitoring. The yogurt drink contains E. coli bacteria, which establish a colony in your gut. They monitor the chemical signals that indicate the presence of a wide range of diseases. If they detect a disease, they start generating the corresponding coloured pigment, producing an easily visible output for the problem to seek out.
And they call it the scalog. But it really challenges what our perception of a biological computer interface could be. And the beauty is not in the code, but in actually the collaboration between the designers and the scientists, because they've managed to couple design thinking methodology, which is so hard right now, and coupled it with speculative design, really making for a very future human-centric project. And just to keep his coming, the next signal is end of life. And in the episode San Junipero, it really explores the question of end of life and life after death. And so in the episode San Junipero is this virtual environment where if you are like nearing your end of days, or if you are just about to pass over, there is a way you can upload yourself to the virtual cloud and live as a younger, healthier version of yourself. So in the spirit of crossing over, this next project really explores how to bridge the gap between this life and the next. So this is Dan Chen's end-of-life machine, and he imagined a possible future where people are moving even further away from each other, like their families and their friends, and how it's really breeding more isolation. And so if you're not able to make it to a loved one's side, he just wanted to show an extreme example.
I am here to help you and guide you through the last moments of Earth. I am sorry that your family and friends are not able to be here with you. We hope you will have a pleasant afterlife.
So creepy, but Dan Chen really wanted to focus and start us getting to think of how do we want robots to fill in our lives in the future, and also like, can they replace human intimacy? Alright, so that's one way to go out, but if you are a little bit more adventurous, there is the Euthanasia Coaster, which is a roller coaster designed by this Lithuanian designer who really imagined a future of overpopulation, rising healthcare costs, and longer lifespans. So he kind of wanted to design a way to opt out that was a little bit more enjoyable. So it's designed to kill you through euphoria, and the first drop and the first loop will kill you by cutting off the oxygen and blood flow to your brain. And the other 6 loops are basically there as an insurance policy, just in case you're going to do it. Yeah, so this is a project that really made a big splash in terms of public response. For starters, someone went out and concepted, scripted, produced a whole fictitious backstory of how this roller coaster came to life. On the internet, there have been countless blogs, YouTube reactions, people making simulations and replications of the experience of riding this roller coaster, and somebody went out and made a song and music video of it.
Which is incredibly catchy.
Yeah,
it's surprisingly good.
It's
on Spotify.
It's on Spotify. It's like #1. And if that weren't permanent enough, you can go get a tattoo of it. So the designer says, of course, it is not for everybody. Very much like thrill rides and horror movies, but it's definitely one of those projects that has kind of unsettled the present and got everybody talking.
So another very strong signal is climate change. It seems as if, let me back up. So Black Mirror touched on it in the episode Hated in the Nation indirectly, where the bees have died off and now they have these robotic bees that, of course, make the horrible Black Mirror things. It seems as if you can't start the news, you can't open the news right now without seeing some sort of dire prediction or something horrible that's happening or will be happening soon. And there have been designers that wanted to explore possible futures using speculative design. So the 2 designers who wrote the book Speculative Everything did a project called Designing for an Overpopulated Planet Foragers. And what they're really asking about is about food shortages. What's going to happen if in the next 40 years we really do need to make 70% more food like the UN is saying? So they created all of these mock-ups of this different type of gear you could wear, essentially, using synthetic biology. It's a way to go and extract nutrition from non-human foods. So, for example, in the top left, going and getting a meal from algae, essentially, or on the bottom right, being able to get some sort of meal from bark of a tree, like other species do. But not only did they genetically, or not only did they mock these up, they actually built these pieces as well, so you can go and interact with them and see them, so the debate is even more tangible. Then they also went out and did a documentary series, kind of photographs of where these foragers go out into the world and are actually trying to get nutrition from these things they've built. Now, I don't believe that they're saying we should create these. They're more trying to use speculative design to, again, raise more questions about food shortages, something that's a real concern of theirs. So another look at climate change is this. Imagine you're in London in 2050 and you walk into an apartment. And at first the apartment looks quite normal. But when you look out the window, you'll see a darkened sky, and out on the street there are people fighting over food. As you walk through the kitchen, you hear the radio on, and you hear stories about crop failures, or you hear stories about eco-terrorists and food truck hijackings. You look on the shelves and on the table, and there's a cookbook called Cooking for Scarcity, and it's all about how to make do when there's really no food around. There's another book called Pets as Protein, in these little words. There's also a fully functioning fog pond machine where you can grow mushrooms and peppers and mealworms as a way to survive in this small space. So this is an installation called Mitigation of Shock by Superflux. And what they're doing is, again, trying to make this possible future feel more tangible. If we keep going unabated with our current climate change, or on our current path, this could be a possible future. And let's make it more realistic. Let's see how it could actually feel in London in 2050. There was a study done by the New York Times where they asked people around the US, how much do you think global warming will hurt the United States? And between like 50 to 70% said, yeah, it's going to hurt the United States. But then when they were asked, how will it hurt you personally, it was considerably lower. So if they were to interact with any of these speculative designs, perhaps walk through that apartment, and they thought maybe a little bit more concerned about the future, would those numbers change?
The next signal harkens back to the Christmas special from Black Mirror, and in it there is a technology that you can take a digital copy of yourself, and it has all of your tastes, your memories, your preferences, and turns it into your virtual assistant. And that virtual assistant can basically run your life, it can run your house, and everything would be just how you like it. So everything in the house then, kind of like the Internet of Things, can talk to each other. So there's a designer in Germany named Iona Nissenbaum who really wanted to explore what happens when those objects and those things become more autonomous. What happens when they start thinking for themselves? And with all this data that they're collecting about us, what might they learn about us? So as a part of a series, she designed a correlation display. And this correlation display really takes all of the data in the house and starts to compare it on global and local patterns. So the intent here is really to combine all of this data into hopefully giving you concepts or ideas around what is starting to correlate. So for instance, on a local level, maybe you'll find that the amount of sleep you get and the size of sleep is directly correlated to the amount of coffee you have. That seems like a no-brainer. But what if on a global level you learn that your consumption of mozzarella is slightly correlated with Nick Cage films? I'm not really sure what they're trying to tell you with that one. There's definitely a couple kinks to fix out, or to work out, but it's starting to combine a lot of these concepts that are big, like really big in our industry right now. You've got big data, you have the Internet of Things. We're hot on the heels of 5G, which is going to revolutionize the way we live, and by extension, our things. So it's definitely something to start considering and thinking about.
Crime and punishment. This is something that Black Mirror does entirely too well. I think that they're the most unnerving when they get into it, and exploring how technology can amplify punishment, physical or most often in the mental sense. And there have been other speculative designers that think about the future of crime and law and punishment and all the rest. One in particular was focused on incarceration rates in prisons in the United States in particular. And as you can see, our population over time is just insane, our prison population here throughout the U.S. But attached to that then are the disenfranchisement and voting rights concerns that come with those that have been in prison. And the designer wanted to raise questions and explore how design in some way could be involved in thinking about alternate futures. So this man named Dirk Algrim, sorry it's kind of hard to read, this is his project called Citizens Behind Bars. He's at IDEO. And the idea is that this piece of technology, this device, could be brought into a jail cell on voting day and placed between two bars and turned. And then using their thumbprint, a prisoner could identify themselves, and then be able to vote in the elections that concern them, that their local and state and federal representatives. So it's a beautiful piece of design. It fits really well. It's an engineering, a really nice work. But really the point of it is to ask questions about these voting rights issues and what could be done in some way, if not this way. So the next piece is on riots and mob violence in a way. So this is the Yellow Vest protest in France. This is just 2 months ago, I think. And there was a designer named Ralph Borland who created this thing called Suited for Subversion. And he was wondering, what if fashion could help diffuse these situations? What if these could reduce the type of dangerous thinking that comes with us versus them mentality? So he created this. It's called Suited for Subversion. And there are 3 elements to it. There's a camera at the top that live streams everything that's happening. So if you're at a riot, it would perhaps capture any sort of foul play on either side. It's got a soft exterior, so if you get hit with a baton or a brick or a fist or whatever, you don't really feel it. But I think the most interesting part of it is there's a heartbeat speaker. So it amplifies your heartbeat out to the world, to the other side of the line. And in a way, he's saying, is this a way that could connect us as humans, to show this vulnerability? Could it diffuse the situation? So if you imagine you're at a protest and there's just a whole bunch of these, and all their heartbeats are going out into the world, is this some way that could actually find some sort of mutual ground or connection with others that are there? If not, there's always one surefire way to diffuse any sort of situation like that. She's supposed to be deployed all over the world.
Okay, so you know the Black Mirror episode where a giant tech company has been analyzing user data for decades, and now it's using that information to shape human behavior by changing our phones and shipping us products to improve our lives? Oh, wait, that's... Okay, so that actually isn't a Black Mirror episode. It sure sounds like it.
So in 2017, there was a video leaked by Google X to the online magazine The Verge. And in this video called The Selfish Ledger, it really imagined a possible future of total data collection and how that could change you and your society. So The Verge really went into and rolled their sleeves up and just dived into the ethics and the business or the ramifications of what this type of technology could do to us. And of course, it was referenced and called Tech Mirror. And they reached Google for comments, and they said that it was designed to be disturbing, and that it was a project that was meant to provoke discussion and debate. And don't worry, it's not anything they're working on. So to answer the question, yes, there are businesses that are tapping into this type of design. But what's unsettling or kind of scary is that a lot of it's being hidden behind closed doors and NDAs, thus severely limiting the opportunity to kind of critique it and discuss it in a public forum. But maybe you're an optimist, and hopefully they're just working on all the kinks and trying to figure out what the downsides of their technology is, right?
So you might also be thinking, these were great, but if any of them actually put us onto that preferable cone, has it actually helped with a happy ending in some way? So the United Arab Emirates invited the agency Superflex to help them think through their future energy policy, their decisions about how they're going to take their country forward using energy. So Superflex came and created a whole bunch of different speculative designs to help them think about what would they do if they stayed on the current path. And one, which I think is the most powerful, is they extrapolated out what would the air be like if they continued to burn fossil fuels in the way that they are now. And they made it so that you could breathe the air from the future. What could be more tangible than breathing air from the future, right? The very next day, after that big event, there was a tweet put out that said that they would be changing their entire energy strategy and investing millions and millions into renewable energies. Did that speculative design tip the scales? Maybe, but in any way, if it helped move in that preferable direction, I would say that that's a success.
So if you're interested at all and you want to get involved, there's a couple of different ways to do that. If you are a business or a government entity, there are a handful of agencies that can help you and work with you. A lot of them we touched on today, and at the end of this, we'll have a bunch of links if you want more information.
If you, as an individual, think, I want to go and have these discussions with other people, well, you're in luck. There's a group called the Speculative Futures. They're founded in San Francisco, and they have chapters all over the world that do this very thing. They present these prototypes and have people discuss them. We're very proud to say that this last month we had the very first Chicago meetup at our agency Digitas as a way to as having these talks. We had a panel with a blockchain expert and a science fiction writer and a designer talking about these types of things. It was great.
But if you can't wait and you want to go out and start today, you are in luck because tonight South by is hosting the Interactive Innovation Awards ceremony, and it's at the Convention Center, yeah. And so they have a new type of design that's being featured this year, and it is speculative design. So we checked out a couple of the examples. There's 5 of them. They were pretty great, so you should totally check it out. So in conclusion, another thing that Black Mirror is really known for is its Easter eggs, and every time a season drops, everyone is scrambling to find them all. But there's one Easter egg that manages to crop up in every season, and that is this song. Anyone who knows what love is will understand.
I like that song.
So in an interview about that song, Charlie Brooker, the creator, said, there's nothing to it. It's like timeless and classic and haunting, and it would be new to most viewers. But then they liked it so much they just kept using it in future seasons. But we would argue that that song, anyone who knows what love is will understand, is actually very applicable to Black Mirror and speculative design. The lyrics are about an abusive relationship. Someone is treated poorly and continues going back to the same person, right? In a way, it could be a metaphor for our relationship to technology, how we keep having these problems and we are allured and drawn to this new shiny tech without thinking of what could happen next. And speculative design is a way to help break that cycle.
Right, because the power of speculative design is not in what's actually built, it's more in the conversations that we have. The more inclusive conversations that we have with everyone at all levels, the better we can plan and rethink our possible futures today.
And with a lot of hard work and collaboration and a bit of luck, we can begin to treat our future selves just a little bit better.